All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Rick Chia. I am the co-founder and VP of casting at Jammergig and the host of today's webinar, From Unknown to Unforgettable, Standing Out in the Audition Process. Welcome. I'd like to welcome you all and thank you all for being here today. Um, on the back end, we have our CEO of Jammergig and Jammergig One, Andrew Bustill. You can't see him, but he is here on the back end helping out to make sure that everything goes smoothly. Now, we usually have a global audience whenever we do these. And so one of the things we do is we ask everyone where you're from. So while we give everyone a moment to hop on and join in, I'd love to ask you all to let us know in the chat box from what city and what country you're hailing from. Just type your city and country into the comments box at the, I believe it's the lower right corner of the screen. Laval, bonjour. Austin, Texas, USA, welcome, welcome. Toronto, great to see you. I'm in Toronto right now, even though I live in Montreal. Las Vegas, welcome, glad to see you. Palm Bay, Florida. I'm originally from Florida, actually, Gainesville. Vancouver, welcome. Argentina, living in Vietnam. South Africa, welcome, welcome, welcome. Good to see you. Antwerp, Belgium. Now, as we, Montreal, welcome. As I continue speaking, I'd like to ask you all a crucial question. So, just to test your knowledge, my first question to all of you is, when does the performer evaluation process start? So you are contributing, you're submitting something for an audition for a role or for a creator job. When does that performer evaluation process start from the casting end? Does the evaluation start when you start performing at a live audition? So just type your answers into the chat while I talk. That question brings me to one of the things that we'll be doing a little differently today with respect to previous webinars, is that instead of a Q&A session at the very end of the webinar, I'd like for today to be just a little bit more interactive. I'll be asking questions throughout, and I'd love to see your answers in that chat. Some of them we might be able to discuss directly. So throughout the webinar, every time you hear me ask a question, go ahead and post your answers right into the chat. Do it quickly because I will be moving on quickly, but let's see how many of you can get the answer or the answers correct, or at least close, or even add to that discussion. And if you have a question during today's discussion, feel free to drop it into the comments box as well, and I'll do my best to answer it. Now, I can't guarantee that I'll be able to answer every single question that comes through, but I will do my best to cover some of the most widespread and most important subjects. All right, looks like we're ready to kick things off. So my question, when does the performer evaluation process start? Does evaluation start when you start performing at a live audition? The answers I see, the evaluation moment starts from the headshot in our CV up on my perspective. I think the audition process starts the moment you walk into an audition room, or as soon as you submit online, if it is online. Even prior to submission, if we establish any kind of previous contact, and from the application is submitted, I think. All right, when does the performer evaluation process start? It starts the moment of first contact, whether that be an email or a first submission or running into someone who's got a project, and when you start talking to them. Okay, and this is really important because we don't just evaluate how good you are. There are a lot of things at play here. We evaluate the risk involved in hiring you, or the risk involved in the idea of hiring you. And we're evaluating risks to the show, risks to other team members as well. And when I say risk, I'm not just talking about physical risk. We're talking about things like risk of delays, response time, decision-making time, your consideration of other people's time. Are you thinking just about your time, or are you thinking about someone else's as well? Because no man is an island. A show is not done by one person. Time is money. I mean, it literally is money. And when production team members can't move forward without an answer from you, every day could be hundreds of thousands of dollars spent just while everyone's waiting. Now they're doing other things, but a lot of decisions cannot be made until you give them that answer. So the person in casting may also have you as a first choice. They might have you on their list as a first choice. And as such, that person is going to wait until the last possible moment before going to the second choice. But if you don't respond, by the time that person sends an offer to the second choice, that second choice may no longer be available, which could mean months of work that is just wasted. So now, if you're a casting director, there's a time crunch. So in order to meet that time crunch, you've got to spend more money in order to make that happen, in order to meet that deadline. Now, many times in my career have I been faced with performers who either don't respond to communications or respond within an unreasonable amount of time, like literally a month or two. And I've heard all kinds of reasons for that. Justification, for instance, I was waiting for news from another contract. That's a common one. Or I was traveling, which in 2025 doesn't really make sense to me because we all have phones, we all have access to internet. Or because I wasn't interested in the role or I wasn't available. I've even had from a potential collaborator someone not show up for a meeting and saying, if I don't respond to the invitation, it means that I can't make it. Now, why do you think that statement makes no sense at all? Okay, here's the problem with all of that. The way you behave um, when you don't have the job, that gives us an indication of how you'll behave when you do have the job. If you don't show respect for other people's time and pressure deadlines before getting hired, what would make us think that you would suddenly be respectful to the production and other performance once you do have the job? Right? Let's look at some of the answers here that are posted. I believe the evaluation moment happens when the second you get out of the car, if in person. It's actually before then, starts immediately. Um, but what if you have no news to tell? Okay, what if the last communication with the casting director was a question and you don't have the answer? What if your situation has not changed since the last communication? Well, no news is actually news. So on the casting side, knowing what your delay is helps us to plan. It helps us to know if we need to work on a contingency plan, or it helps us to know if we just need to tell our client to be patient, that they have to wait a little bit longer. Um, People get nervous when there is no news, and a nervous producer is really something that you do not want. And I know some of you out there know what I'm talking about. Okay. Now you might think, oh, I'll respond next time a role comes along. I'm not interested now, but next time I'll respond when I am interested and available. But see, that's too late because we have already created our picture of you and have our notes on you. And we've added the red flag that it's too risky to put you on a team. So, unless there is no other choice on our next casting call, you're not going to be on the top of anyone's list, okay, just because of that. So, in a nutshell, casting and artistic directors will be consciously or unconsciously judging you on response time and response quality. Um, it's because it's a measure of risk. How risky is it to hire you? And we will want to reduce the risk as much as possible because productions already have inherent risks without having to add more. So, whenever you don't respond, the people on the other end are going to be assuming one of several things. Okay, the first one, they're going to assume, you're not interested or available for the project. The second thing they will probably assume is, or may assume, is you have no concept at all of the work and delicate time pressure that is put on all the other people working to support this project. The third thing that they might be assuming is you don't respect other people's time, you don't respect their work or their stress levels. The next thing they might be assuming is you're not receiving the messages. Maybe my messages are going to your spam email box. And the last one is maybe you're incapacitated, maybe you're in the hospital, maybe you're even dead. Okay, that's quite morbid, but it has happened. Believe me, it has happened. So note that none of these assumptions are good. None of them are good. But the first three, there's no excuse for. And from a director's standpoint, those three are red flags. And for the last two, if the director is not informed of the last two, they're going to assume that it's one of, or may assume that it's one of the first three, right? All right, before I continue on, I have another question for all of you to answer. When do you begin preparing for the next audition? So think about that, answer in the chat, and I will continue talking. All right. All right, so going back to communication. Good communication is important because we live in a connected network, right? It's important to understand that the world is a small place. And this industry is even smaller. Everybody knows everybody. You've heard of, I'm sure you've heard of the theory of 6 degrees of separation. Okay, that's the idea that everyone in the world is connected through a maximum of 6 people. Well, about 12 to 13 years ago, Facebook did a study that showed that through social media, that separation was closer to 4 degrees, 12 to 13 years ago. Today, that separation is most likely a lot less. So a red flag with one company has a high risk of adding a red flag to your reputation with other companies. Okay, so don't be a red flag, basically. Be respectful, be prompt, understand that no news is news and that no news is just as important to inform people of. All right. So back to my question. When do you begin preparing for the next audition? Right. So see what people have answered here. Now, that's a good answer. Now, as soon as possible, ASAP. It's a constant preparation. You never stop preparing or advancing, in my opinion. Well, I'm on standby position, ready to go any second step or next audition in this context. Yes, the answer is, my answer is last week, okay? I wanna just talk to you a little bit about how we used to do things at Cirque du Soleil, the submission and audition process. And some of you out there already are familiar with that. We used to have the concept of just always on casting. We had an entry portal and people would submit profiles and we would go through, we'd evaluate everybody. Okay. And then certain people we invite to an audition. Sometimes we had open auditions, but everyone was evaluated. And even when there wasn't a role open now. Okay. And there is a reason for all of that. Okay. At Cirque, by the time COVID arrived, we had about 1,800 or more contracts to sign, artist contracts to sign every single year. If we were to do a live audition for each of those roles each and every time, then we would have had to run 3 to 5 auditions per day, every single day. And that is assuming no weekends, no holidays, no vacations. So you can see how that is pretty much impossible. Okay. The second reason we did it that way is that many casting calls were urgent calls where they needed someone in a show either within a week or two or immediately. And if we start the actual search process at the time we receive the casting call, then it's going to be very, very difficult to meet that deadline. It could take a couple hours to a couple of days just to get an audition poster created, approved, and published. And with some of the bigger companies, that can take quite a while. Okay. Whereas if you already have a database of people pre-evaluated, then you can communicate with performers immediately and perhaps get your answer the same day, sometimes within minutes, which has happened before. I believe our record for receiving the casting call and signing the artist, I believe is 2 hours, okay, which is very fast. All right, before I continue on, I have another question for you to answer. What is a database? Okay, I've mentioned the word database. What does that mean? What is database, right? Okay, so that was the Cirque du Soleil process, except that there are other companies who also do things that way, especially today, post-COVID. Many of the big production companies are gravitating towards building their own rosters or databases of talent for the productions and roles of tomorrow, not just of today. You know, uh, I believe RWS is trying to do it that way. Royal Caribbean does it that way. Uh, Disney has their own database, their own rosters, and MSC does. Many other companies are doing it that way. Um, uh, a lot of companies, a lot of that comes from COVID, but some of them were doing it before. Most of them, it's been since COVID. So the idea that I'm trying to get across to you is proactivity. And proactivity means doing things before the need arises, creating profiles in different databases, being ready, applying before the auditions are announced, right? So the most common ways of doing that is, like I said, opening profiles in individual company rosters. I want to go to Royal Caribbean and I want to open a profile there so they can contact me when something comes up. I want to go to Cirque du Soleil. I want to go to Madison Square Gardens. You know, um, which brings me back to the question that I just asked: what is database? I think a lot of people have misconceptions of what a database is, right? So let's see some of the answers you put on. It's an ongoing process, collecting your material, social proof, and building, expanding your network. Like that, you're ready for the next audition call. That's a description of the process. But next answer, I think it's like a bank of people with like their talents, information, marketing materials, and stuff. And then you can go through a database to find the specific talent you want. There are databases for talent agencies and like on casting networks. Next answer, database is online collection of possible candidates for future and current productions. It gives the artist the chance to update your profile. Yes, those are correct answers. But one of the things I want to get across about what a database is, what that means, okay? Casting Networks is a database, but that doesn't mean that all databases are public, okay? So if you have um, uh, an address book, that's a database. Okay, it's just a database that doesn't have the capability of managing things like audio files and video. But a database is basically just that roster. That's pretty much all it is. It's a structured set of data that's in a computer or in a cloud server, something like that. Something that is accessible in various ways, not necessarily public. So yes, Spotlight is a database, but what I have on my computer with lists of people and their contact information, that is also a database. All right. So yes, it can be time consuming to manage this, and there are still companies that are requesting submissions by email, as you all know. That's their choice. It's very time consuming, but they're out there. All right. So now that we kind of know how that particular process works, um, I would like to talk about things like profiles, right, or websites. Okay. One of the problems with not everybody has a website. Not every artist has a website, but some of them do. The ones that do, some of the problems that I see with the artist websites that people have uh, gravitate around things like actually too much information, um, websites where it's difficult to find the most pertinent information quickly. One thing I see often is special effects. You know, there are a lot of website suppliers out there like Wix and Squarespace that really have a whole bunch of special effects that you can just add with a little click, and they all look really cool. So it's really tempting to put them all in. Um, but it's actually quite a distraction. It's a distraction, and it's quite frustrating from someone who just wants to see what you do, how you do it within a few seconds. Um, Organization of the information on a website is a problem I see a lot. Um, I see, and this is one of the things that baffles me. A lot of artist websites, performing artist websites, have no video, which kind of doesn't really make any sense. Some of them have too many videos. Some of them have no photos, and then you have others that have um, uh, uh, too many photos. Okay, if you don't have a website at all or a public portfolio, well, that already is problem number one. So we have all kinds. And for this last problem that I mentioned, a lot of casting directors today, you'll probably notice a lot of casting directors today and artistic directors of things like dance companies, theater companies, they're asking for social media links. Okay, they say submit a social media link. Now they do that for several reasons. Right? One of the reasons is that most artists are posting their performance videos on social media anyway. Okay, so a lot of those videos are there. Um, when an artistic director asks an artist or reaches out and asks them to submit for something while they're waiting, and you all know you don't always go and apply directly right away, right at this minute. It saves casting and artistic directors from chasing after the artist and waiting for that submission to happen before they can see what they do, before they can see the videos. Um, as I said, each hour spent waiting is lost time and lost money and an increase in risk. Okay. But another important reason is that social media gives us a glimpse into the kind of person you are. As I mentioned, the person you are is just as important as what you do. Uh, Not all job environments are for everybody. That's something to understand. We do not just look at skill and talent. We have to ask ourselves, will this person be comfortable and well working with a team, or are they just a solo work? So someone who only does solo work. Will they be good on a ship? Will they be good in a dance company, or is their personality more of a guest performer? Okay, all of that is important, right? All right, I have another question for you that I want you to think about, answer while I continue. Um, there are some inherent problems with respect to using social media accounts as a portfolio. Can anyone tell me what those problems are? So as I continue talking, just throw your answers into the chat feed and we will read through some of them. All right. All right, to continue what I was saying, in some cases, um, one of the reasons casting directors or artistic directors could be interested in your social media accounts is for high to see how many followers you have. Okay, a high social following can help with ticket sales, but only in certain cases. Okay, it's not always pertinent. One common myth is that high follow numbers automatically have high monetary value, or that it somehow means that you're really good at what you do. But people follow and they like posts for a whole slew of different reasons, most of which are not even connected to how good you are or how good you are at what you do. Likes on posts don't really give you much of a financial turn. financial return most of the time. You could have 50,000 likes on your post. How does that help you with paying your rent? Okay, in most cases it doesn't. And in those cases where there is monetary value on those high follow numbers, it's usually linked to advertising dollars, or in specific cases where the numbers could potentially increase ticket sales of a show that you're in. Right? But any company who is actually focused more on your actual technical and artistic performance quality, above all else, is not going to be concerned with follow numbers because that doesn't really help anything. Okay, follow numbers doesn't mean you're good. Follow numbers means a whole bunch of people like something that you're doing, and it might have nothing to do with your performance. It might be because they just like your dog, or they like watching your vacations. Right. All right. To go back to that questions, the problems with social media, inherent problems. So let's take a look at the answers. All right. Comments from others. Maybe depends on what those comments are. The risk of not showing enough versatility. I think that has to do with the person posting what they post. Okay, posting too much, so it is hard to find exactly what you're looking for, or the reverse, not posting enough, so there's not enough information. Okay, that is very astute, a very astute observation. Okay, yes. Um, it First of all, social media doesn't have your contact info, your bio, besides that small one on top, or an easy way to contact you and to document the conversations. Now, I say documenting conversations because, yes, companies that have a high volume of casting, they do document the communications with you. Okay, why? Because people forget stuff. If they tell you something, they want to make sure they have a record of what they told you, and if you tell them something, they want a record of that too, because they will most likely have to return to it. How many times have you said, well, what did we decide? What did I tell them? They need to know. Okay. They can't guess. Um, and communications on social media there is messaging, but it's not really made for that. It's not really made for that. Social media is mainly made for you to show other people's stuff. Um, Let's see, using older footage. Yes, there is old footage on a lot of social media sites, and that does become problematic. Um, the uh, other problem with social media is that a director cannot contact multiple performers all at the same time through social media. Now, that's not a problem if you only have to contact three. In my experience, I've often had to contact 30, 40, 100, 500 people at the same time through social media. That would take me weeks. Okay, that's one of the inherent problems. Um, from a skill level and role match decision making standpoint, social media is pretty inefficient. Now, social media accounts, um, to come back to what Laura Hendrickson posted, social media accounts are not focused only on professional content. So whenever I go to someone's Instagram account, for example, I have to sift through all the photos and videos of their vacation in the Bahamas and their last three meals, their political posts, shout outs to friends and family, pictures of their dog and their cat. That can take a good bit of time before I find the pertinent video that shows the skill and talent. So it might take me 5 minutes, might take me 6 minutes. And 5 minutes spent on finding the right content might not seem like a long time, but when you have hundreds to go through, to give you a solid example, when we were casting the MJ Immortal World Tour many years ago, we had for one audition in Paris, we had over 600 submissions. Okay, so multiply that by 5, 6, 7 minutes, you get an idea of how much time that takes, right? Uh, MSA. I don't know if you know what MSA is. McDonald Selznick and Associates. It is the largest dance agency in North America. They receive 800 submissions per week. Per week. all right? 800 submissions per week. So just multiply that by 5 to 7 minutes, right? Another thing is that on social media, you don't usually mention your height, which for a lot of roles is absolutely essential. Okay, so those are the most common problems with casting on social media. All right, so before I continue, one more question for you to answer. How many of you tend to submit only a headshot and a CV or resume for the Americans for casting calls? And how well do you think that represents your talent and skill? Okay, no video, just headshot and a CV, right? How well do you think that represents you? Okay, back to the discussion on social media problems. The ironic thing about all of these problems is that this is an area that even a lot of casting and artistic directors themselves are asking for something that is perhaps not in their own best interest. It's a lot of people ask for that, and they don't even realize how inefficient it is, because the perception of how efficient someone is relative, right? So what that means is that people will consider their processes efficient compared to what they were doing before. So if I'm receiving submissions by email, let's use this as an example, which to me is time consuming. It takes a lot of time to do that. But in the past, let's say I was receiving them in paper format by regular post. Well, then yes, receiving it by email is a lot more efficient than what I was doing before. So then I would feel like I'm being very efficient today, right? And when one feels that they're already efficient, they will tend to not look for another more efficient ways of doing things because I'm already efficient, right? Okay, back to my question. How many of you tend to submit only a headshot and a resume for casting calls? How well do you think this represents your talent and skill? Um, Always send a video link, even if they don't ask. I would tend to agree with that. Um, I think a lot of people forget to give thanks. I see a lot of Mimi posts. Okay, that's from the previous question. A headshot and CV is not enough. They have to see you in action, especially if it's freestyle or if you really have to communicate feeling through your dance, you need a video. Yes, absolutely. Um, okay, we have a question here. Okay, based on what I mentioned about social media, do I have any recommendations about a common point to upload in those websites? Okay, and we'll talk. I'll talk about this a little bit later. I always recommend having some sort of concise profile that you can include besides social media. That is where I think they're going to get most of the information. And then when they go to social media, I think that gives them a little more of insight into you as a person. Uh, I think that uh, I think that personality from social media, you can get an idea of someone's personality, probably better than something like a resume. Um, but from a casting perspective, easier to make a decision on skill and talent through something that's a little bit more structured. All right. Uh, Impossible only a headshot? Yes, absolutely. That is my feeling as well. Link to video is always a plus. That's more than a plus. It's an essential, and we'll get to that. All right. So, if why do so many casting directors ask for a headshot and CV and a resume? If that's not the best way to see talent. Um, Now, first of all, this is a practice that's been around for a very, very long time. Let's rewind all the way back to vaudeville days. The paper process, okay, the CVs and photos, a long, long time ago, there was no internet. There was no, um, we didn't have phones. We didn't have videos in our pockets. Okay. People used to have live auditions for everything, and people would just show up at the audition date and time. They would wait in line and they would see everybody one by one. Okay. At some point, that got out of hand. At some point, there would be projects where you'd have hundreds, thousands of people waiting outside the door, It would take forever. People would be sometimes standing outside, it would start raining, or it'd be really hot, um, and people would be unhappy. It would be unsafe in extremely hot weather, that kind of thing. So at some point, somebody said, "Listen, we got to get these numbers down. We cannot do this way." And so in those days, all you had basically was a photo and a resume and a CV. And so that's how they did their first weed out, because that's all they had. And then when video came about, video was a very slow process and very, very expensive. Okay? A video submission back in those days when they had video cameras, it could take days to arrive because people would have to send them by regular post. Um, and on VHS, it could easily take 20 to 45 minutes to go through a video submission, because the rewind took a really long time. So you couldn't scrub through a videotape just like you can scrub through a video today online. You couldn't jump to the beginning and watch it from right away. It would take quite a while. So and then organizing those videotapes afterwards is a very time consuming process, right? But today that's not the case. Today's not That's not the case at all. We have technology, and we can look at video quite quickly, right? So the usefulness of a CV, the information you can get from CV is quite limited, um, to start out with, right? First of all, people lie. They do it all the time. People lie on a CV. Sometimes they have too much information. Sometimes they try to hide the fact of not having a whole lot of experience. Sometimes they try to pull out a whole bunch of big names to impress, which, yes, that does have an impact, but there are some problems with that as well, right? If I see a lot of big names mentioned only once, then I have two things going through my head. One, oh, this might be because everyone wants to work with you. Or is it because no one wants to work with you after that first time? Okay, I don't know. You're giving me the information. I don't know what's truthful. I don't know what's not. Okay. But to be honest, and I've seen it many, 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 many times, especially in Los Angeles, often the person requesting that CV or that resume is interested in seeing if you know any of their friends. They want to know, have you worked with people I know? Do you know people who I know? Okay. Um, then there's that headshot and profile picture. Okay. Another question, can you tell me what the purpose of a headshot is? And how many photos should I include in a submission? Okay, think about that, post your answer. All right. I have a little story to tell you. Way back when I was working in LA, I heard, and I believe it was an agent, giving advice about headshots. And they said, you want to look your best in a headshot. If you have physical faults, you want to hide them. And the example they gave was, let's say you have a big nose, right? Then you'll want to take that headshot straight on to hide the fact that you have a big nose, right? Now, the thing is, you might be, you might get invited to a live audition because you hid that big nose. They looked at it and thought, oh, she or he looks pretty. Um, but then you get to the audition, and if they don't want a big nose, you're going to get cut anyway. Okay, and everyone's time is going to be wasted. On the other hand, they might have wanted someone with a big nose and may not have kept you from your photos thinking that you did not have a big nose. So the disadvantage of not being honest in your professional photos, that can go both ways, right? And whenever you get to a live audition, uh, many of you will notice that oftentimes the audition team will take a photo of you either on site, either before, during, or after that audition. Okay, in the old days, it was Polaroids. Now we can do it on our phones. Now that is because of the story that I just told you about the big nose. Most performers do not actually look like their headshot, which defeats the purpose of the headshot. Right? And even though in film projects, the headshot can serve to show how photogenic you are, for everyone else, the primary purpose of a headshot is identification. We just need to see what you look like. We need to be able to recognize you when you walk into a room of 300 people. Okay. Okay. Let me go back to my question, what that purpose of a headshot is, and I want to see what kind of answers that you guys gave. Um, uh, to see if you fit the look for a character they want you to play. Yes, yes. I think the purpose of a headshot for the casting director to determine if you have the fit, if you fit the vision. Yes, and I've usually been told that in a regular submission, unless told otherwise, you only send in one photo, your headshot, and then you can have more photos on your social media or website if they want to see more. All of that is yes. Okay, all of that is yes. Um, the exception to the one photo rule is in dance. Okay, we usually want a headshot and we want a full body shot. Why? Identification. We want to see what you look like. Okay, that is the primary purpose. Okay. But going back to your initial submission, video is the thing for reasons that uh, that seem obvious to me. One cannot evaluate what one cannot see or hear. Simple as that. You know, TV and film aside, again, literally the whole point of auditioning is to see what you do and how you do it. So a submission with no video makes absolutely zero sense. A performer portfolio with no video makes no sense. The video is the only thing that can show what you do and how you do it, which is the whole purpose of this entire process. Right? The purpose of a headshot is a representation of who you are for casting directors to really see you. Yes, it is, but it has to be truthful. Once again, we just need to see you. We need to see what you look like, period. Right. Now, to talk a little bit about portfolios, the practicality of portfolios. So, speaking from a casting perspective, from my end of the game, there's still the problem of organization of all the submissions that come in, especially if we're doing email. And even though it's all electronic, uh, it's still one big mess of Google Drives and web forms and Excel spreadsheets for most directors, right? And this is the reason why I say having a web portfolio that's organized in a way where all that information is presented concisely, easy to access, quickly is so important. One link with everything in it is much easier to organize in an Excel spreadsheet than 2, 3, 4 links plus a PDF document or a video that has to be uploaded, right? So trust me when I say that any director will appreciate the consideration of you having one pertinent, organized web portfolio. Makes things much, much easier for everyone involved, right? Which is why we even created Gig 1 in the first place. Because I can tell you and explain to you in a webinar how to present yourself, how to structure the portfolio, but you all are going to interpret those words in different ways. Myself and a lot of people on my side of this industry who have been doing this for a long time, we kind of know what we need to see. Regardless of what the project is, we know what we need to see. And we know how crucial ease and speed of access is. Conciseness is crucial. But how do you know how to format a portfolio, right? If you go into Wix, what do I do, right? No, that's a simple enough question for me because I'm the one watching them. But most performers don't get told how to do that. They don't, no one teaches performers how to set up a portfolio. When I was a young performer, a dancer, musician, singer, no one told me. And most performers, therefore, don't know the answer to that. So Gig 1 is where we said, okay, we'll do that part for you. We'll just do it. right? Um, let's see what some of these answers like. One page file with all the links. Yes, the minimum amount of page is always preferable. Okay. Um, the thing about the kind of the amount of information that we need to present, even if it's concise, it's even better if it's organized, um, to separate videos from text, that kind of thing, right? Um, yeah, so it's been designed. We designed it so that it has the most impact in the least amount of time. Because the truth is, most directors are going to spend about 30 seconds on your portfolio. Okay, sometimes they'll spend a little bit more, but also sometimes even less. Okay, we're talking about this first pass. They're looking at everyone. They're going to spend about 30 seconds. Okay, why? Why only 30 seconds? And you're thinking, well, that's not fair. I can't. You can't know me through 30 seconds, right? Well, while a portfolio can sometimes be used to make an actual hiring decision, it does happen. Usually, the decision that they're making off a portfolio is not whether to hire you on the spot. Most of the time, that's not going to happen. People don't look at a portfolio and say, oh, let's hire this person. The purpose of the portfolio is to tell us whether or not we want to see more, whether we want to invite you to a live audition, whether or not we need to ask you for another video that's more specific. Most of the time, you're not going to be hired straight off the profile. So knowing this, that's where the Jammer Geek One design is born from. Okay, the templates are already structured, they're already done to what casting and artistic directors need to see and need to see quickly, right? And it's public. You can make it public. It doesn't cost anything to create, and therefore, it doesn't really make sense to not have one. Okay. As I said before, we can't make a decision on an artist that we cannot see. So now you're thinking, okay, if I want to showcase my full talent with all the advantages from all my experience and all my skills, how do I fit that into a concise portfolio? Well, the answer is you don't. Don't fit it all into your portfolio. The most important skill involved in creating a professional portfolio, and this is a skill that I want you to remember, is to know how to cut, to know how to not put everything in it, right? Now, in many cases, that profile is going to be our first contact with you. It's our first introduction into what you do and how you do it. It therefore needs to make a positive impression right off the bat in 30 seconds. 30 seconds determines whether you go into the go back and review pile, or you go into the out pile, or you go into the maybe pile. That first pass is just putting you into piles. 30 seconds, right? So to go back to the subject of video, yes, video is absolutely crucial. That's my big point here. But one or two videos, no more. Okay? Presenting too much is almost as bad as not presenting enough. Why? 30 seconds. Cut to the chase, right? As far as photos, 2 to 4 photos. Okay, the photos are principally to see what you look like, as I mentioned before. Face, full body. We don't need to see the same full body shot in 5 different poses. And we don't need to see one with trees in the background, another on the beach. Okay, we need to understand who you are, what you do, how you do it, and what you look like. Those are the objectives behind the requests for photos and videos. So I just want to look at some of the questions here. Are you meaning a portfolio as in a website? Yes, a website is a portfolio. Okay, that's basically what it is. You're presenting yourself and some of your past work in some sort of presentation. That's basically what a portfolio is. All right. Now, the exceptions to all of this are it's going to be models. Models definitely need a lot more photos. Okay, but models aside, um, if you're a model, then yes, they do need to see the trees. They do need to see you on the beach, blah, blah, blah. But for any other performing artist, I would not recommend doing that. Okay. All right, moving on to the next subject. Um, Submission process. Okay, I have four crucial pieces of advice to give you concerning any submission process. Okay, my four main pieces of advice. The first important piece of advice is to read. Read the submission instructions and any role breakdowns that you're provided. Okay. My second important piece of advice, read those again. And my third important piece of advice is to understand what you read. And my fourth piece of important advice is follow the instructions that you just read. And if you cannot follow instructions for the submission, what would make us think that you will follow instructions once you become part of a cast? Now, I want to give you a concrete example. So I talked to you about MSA, the dance agency, right? Like I said, they receive 800 submissions a week, right? So what they do, instead of looking at all of those, they give you a submission. They have a submission protocol. They have instructions. They ask you submit according to these instructions. Anyone who does not follow the instructions, they automatically cut. They do not even look at the submission. So their first weed out process, their very first one is, do you follow instructions? Okay. And from that, they can probably cut down close to half. Okay. Never ever forget that what is one submission for you, for the casting or artistic director, it might be hundreds, in some cases thousands. Okay. So presentation, how do I present myself? Presentation is really important, but not the way that most people think. Okay? It's not about flash. It's not about seeming bigger than you are, faster than you are, better than you are, even though that does grab attention. But making yourself look better than you are, or taller than you are, or thinner than you are, it's eventually going to come crashing down at some point, either in a live audition when they realize, you're not the way you presented yourself, or on the job if you get hired straight off video, which, as I mentioned, that does happen. Okay. Um, so then, if video is important, what video should I present? Well, the short answer is to present what shows clearly what you do and how you do it. Okay. One of the essential impressions that make a casting person interested is that your presentation be professional but truthful. Professional does not mean high production values. It doesn't mean, you filmed it with a $20,000 camera. Professional just means that we can easily see what you're doing without obvious hiding tactics. Okay. Which brings me to the subject of show reels. Okay, show reels. I just want to tell you a little quick story about show reels. So I worked for I was casting for a large company. I was on a 5-month contract. Then ended up 6 months. And I was in a meeting with someone who has been in this industry for a very long time, been casting for a very long time, has a lot of experience. And we were talking about how show reels don't really show us what the person can do. We talked about the fast clips. We talked about the audio overlay. We talked about the fact that there's so many people on stage in a lot of these clips that you end up just not being able to know exactly how the person stands out. Okay. This being said, we had a casting call. It was urgent. And I said, okay, so what should we ask for? And he said, ask them for a show reel. I was like, wait a minute, show reel? Show reels don't really show, and we've discussed this, don't really, accurately show what they can do. And he said, yeah, just ask them for a show reel. So we got a lot of show reels, and we couldn't see what people could do. So then he said, can you contact them all and then ask them to send just something simple, a solo in a studio? I was like, well, why didn't we ask them for that in the first place? Okay. The whole point of that story is that it shows that even some casting directors and artistic directors, experienced ones, these are not novices. These are people who know the business. Okay. A lot of them themselves don't even really know what they want to receive as a submission. We're not perfect. I'm going to tell you that right now. On my end, we're not perfect. We make mistakes. Okay. And on top of that, a lot of casting directors who've been doing this a long time, they can get stuck on tradition. So be prepared for that. Be prepared for a request for a follow-up video, you know, um, for a situation like this. They might have asked you for a show reel. You give them a show reel, and then they say, "Oh, well, we can't see anything. Can you send us another one?" It happens. Okay, might be frustrating, but it happens. All right. Okay. So I just want to talk about the important takeaways as we wrap this up. Okay. The important takeaways of today's session is to one, be professional and be responsive, even when your situation has not changed since the last communication. Two, be proactive. Don't wait for the jobs to come to you. Make sure you are findable in not only multiple public databases. Now, the thing about public databases, beware of scams because there are a lot of them. Make sure it's legitimate, um, and that you're findable in general on the internet. Okay, do have a public portfolio, one that has the pertinent information that any hiring entity or company will need to make that first decision, that first 30-second decision. Next, understand that simply having a social media account is not enough. A social media account is not a portfolio. Make sure you have a wet portfolio on top of your social media account. That gives us a good understanding of the performer or creator that you are at a glance and through which you can be contacted easily. Okay. Question here: how long do you recommend a show reel to be? Okay. My, I mean, I don't really like show reels, but any video, I'm thinking per skill, about 45 seconds. 45 seconds to a minute. For actors, it needs to be a little bit longer. Things for acting, it takes a little bit longer for us to get a sense of that. But for things like dance and music and circus, 45 seconds to a minute is plenty, right? Next takeaway: no video or not enough video is bad, but having too much video is just as bad as not having enough. Okay. Um, The next takeaway: full hiring decisions are not made off your portfolio, as I said before. The portfolio should allow people to answer that question: do I want to see more? So that you go into the review pile, and then once they've whittled down the submissions to a smaller number, they will go back and look a little bit longer. Okay. The next takeaway is that your audition starts from the very first contact. You're going to be evaluated, either consciously or unconsciously, on how fast you respond, how respectful you are of other people's time, um, and how well you follow directions. Okay. Let me just look at some of these questions. Would you recommend linking your website in your bio on social media? Yes. Yes. Make sure that they have access to it, but social media should not be your main portfolio. Next question: if you're a multidisciplinary artist, should you combine all your disciplines in one or have separate videos for each? Okay, so that is a very, very good question. That is one question that is going to be personal preference for people. I tend to like to have, for at least the first video, at least one video that kind of shows everything. Okay, if you have a specialty, then your second video can have longer clips of just the skills that you're really, really, really good at. Okay. Okay, my last takeaway is the world is a small place. Be aware that the world is small and that this industry is even smaller. Okay, the industry is connected. So don't be a red flag. You might think, okay, I'm a ballet dancer and now I'm going to acting. The acting people don't know anything about, my ballet world. But we're all connected. Okay, someone in a directive capacity can easily recommend a hip hop dancer to a ballet director or a circus performer for the West End. Okay, we're all connected, right? Okay, we talked about the importance of portfolio. I mentioned Jammer Gig One a couple times. Now, before we wrap this up, I'd like to roll a short video about Jammer Gig One so that you get a better understanding of how it works. So, Andrew, if you could roll that video.
We are excited to bring you an exclusive sneak look at the upcoming release of Jammer Gig 1. Creating your profile, publishing a website, and applying for roles using Jammer Gig 1 is really simple. After initial sign-up, you will be requested to enter your basic profile information. Once you have created your account and answered all the questions, you will be directed to the jobs page. This will list all current casting calls you can apply for. We recommend, before applying for any roles, make sure you give yourself the best opportunity by further refining your profile using the Profile menu. Under the My Info tab, you can enter information about yourself, including a summary description, skills, previous work experience, education, representation if you have an agent, and more. Under the Media tab, you can upload files including photos, videos, PDF documents, and sound files. We also support YouTube and Vimeo links. Jammer Gig 1 also allows you to create a professional website. We provide a range of beautiful web templates that you can select from. You can then supply your Jammer Gig 1 website link to prospective employers, which contains everything they need to review your profile, associated media, and even provides a contact form so they can contact you or your agent. Once you are a Jammer Gig 1 user, your profile can be discoverable across the whole Jammer Gig network. This enables production companies to find you and add you as a prospect for open roles in their productions. Once you have updated your profile, you can also start applying for roles. You can search for roles, and once you find a job you would like to apply for, select the roles you are interested in, answer the questions for each selected role, and submit your application. You will also be able to see all previous applications you have submitted and their status using the Applications menu. You can also use your Jammer Gig 1 profile as your master profile across the Jammer Gig network. When you log into one of our client sites, you can automatically link your accounts so that any changes to your profile can be synchronized. If you are serious about your career, then Jammer Gig 1 is a must-use tool to help you to take it to the next level. To sign up free, just visit jammergig.one today.
All right. We're past time, except that there are a couple interesting questions here that I think we should tackle. I hope you all can stay the extra few minutes. There's one here. Could you still audition as a dancer in companies, etc., with a dance minor but with the experience? Now, I'm not quite sure what that means. Could you clarify and put in the chat while I go to the next question? Do you have any recommendations for situations where you already are selected for big companies, but they don't come back with contracts for you for a while? How do you recommend to face the communication in those cases? Okay, that does happen and does happen a lot for many reasons. One is that a big company might get you into their database thinking that you fit a lot of the roles that we have and continually replenish. Um, but then something happens, roles get changed. Sometimes a client says, we've changed this role. It used to be a female dancer. Now I think we're going to make it a male singer. Okay. So out of a sudden, your profile does not fit what they thought it did. Okay. That could happen. Sometimes they even might say, we would like you for this next batch of casting for this next cast, and then out of a sudden, something happens. The show gets canceled. The dates get moved, or and to go into politics, the politics do happen. Yes, the politics do happen, and sometimes they have to hire the nephew of the producer or something like that. So that happens. All right. Okay. So to go back to this question, I meant say you danced for many years and performed in college, but you have a dance minor, not a dance degree. Could you still get into companies or shows? Yes, absolutely. In fact, a lot of professional dancers and singers don't have degrees. Okay. Um, and I want to answer this last question. We're running out of time. Is it appropriate to ask for feedback from a company after receiving a rejection for a role? The answer is yes, absolutely. Not everyone will be able to answer. I try to, but not everyone does. But yes, there is absolutely no problem with asking for feedback. All right. Okay, so we've reached the end of our time. But before I wrap up, I just want to encourage you all to stay connected with us, to follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, but especially to create your own Jabber Gig One portfolio as soon as you can. It's easy, and as I mentioned before, it is free. All you need is an email address to log in. Um, Today's webinar will be, I believe we did record this, and it will be available to everyone who registered as soon as possible. If you have colleagues and friends or teachers or peers who would benefit from watching this, feel free to share that recording with them, right? And we love to hear your feedback. Okay, don't hesitate to reach out to us. Let us know your thoughts about today's session. What resonated with you? What topics you'd like us to explore in future webinars? And whether you have questions about the event or ideas for future discussions, or simply want to learn more about who we are, what we do, we're always a message away. You can either on social media or through email. Right? If you have questions as well that you didn't get to that we didn't get to answer, you can answer. You can ask us those as well. So. My name is Rick Chia, once again, from Jammer Gig and Jammer Gig One. Thank you immensely once again for joining us. I wish you a fantastic week, a successful year, and as always, we all wish you only the absolute best that this industry has to offer. So we'll see you next time.